Good afternoon, America, and good morning, Australia. You're listening to Radio Toni, and we're live streaming onto LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. This is a new show for Radio Toni, and in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to my amazing new co-host. For those of you listening live on the social media and YouTube, my wonderful assistant, Teo, is ready to respond to your comments and questions with our website link. Please remember that we'd love you to like, subscribe, and email us with any of your suggestions for the show. Just remember that radiotoni.com is a place where you can find any information, and we will talk about Kez and her links shortly. But first, I want to tell you all about Kez Wickham St George. She's a best-selling Australian author, and she believes that unique walking stories are just waiting to be told. Kez Wickham St George is the driver of her own creativity and her passion to inspire and nurture others to tell their stories. Her values are simple. When you touch a heart, you can change a life. By encouraging you to write or journal, her belief is it will only add value to your life. Traveling extensively, including the width and breadth of Australia, she's collected lots of stories and experiences. Now, with 9 novels published and 3 published internationally and 3 nationally, 2 children's books now reside in many different companies with 2 royal families. Beginning in 2019, her first book of poetry, Entwined, was published, forming a corridor between the city of Rockingham and Akio, its sister city in Japan, to bring poets and artists together, plus an invitation to be a guest speaker at the Writers' Retreat in Com Castle, Dublin, Ireland, late in November 2019. And in 2020, Kez's novel Metal Mermaid became a #1 bestseller in the category of adventure caravanning. Kez is also a popular speaker at many local events, ever the storyteller. However, mentoring and consulting to assist others to tell their stories has become a large part of her life. And now she's co-hosting live shows with me. Good morning, Kez.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Oh, look, we've had a little technical hiccup this morning starting the show. And of course, as you know, Kez, we've been having lots and lots of rain. So currently, I'm hoping that you can't hear the rain bucketing down in the background. The river is rising again, so we'll be on flood watch for another day. We're in Queensland, Australia, and it's drought 1 minute and flooding the next. So not only is Queensland suffering a bit of flooding, but southern New South Wales has had a deluge, and they're experiencing catastrophic flooding today. So for any of those people who might happen to be listening, just know that we are with you. Now, I want to get on with the show. And Kez, when did you start writing?
Many years ago, when I was a child, actually. Yeah, I had polio as a child and I was bedridden for quite a while. So my mum, being the religious person she taught me from the Bible how to write and read. So when I went back to school, I didn't have a normal education. I was full of biblical quotes.
That must have made interesting conversation for the teachers and kids at school.
It was. I wasn't quite understood. I wasn't understood. And I was sort of, I guess I was on the outer. I had to refine my little group. The little group that I hung out with were no longer available to me. They'd gone on in classes and been forwarded in their education. And of course, I had to sit back in the same class that when I was afflicted with polio, I had left.
Yeah.
The sad thing was, Toni, a lot of my classmates had passed away. So I didn't have them as friends anymore. So I learned about life very, very early in my life. I learned about death and illness and what it can do to a family and what it can do to a person. Yeah. So it encouraged me to write. I had my mother encouraged me to write down my feelings because in those days, to be seen and not heard was a child's purpose.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we have a bit more freedom now to write and talk about our feelings.
Yeah.
Do you have a muse when you write, Ken?
Oh, I do. I have a spiritual one, and I have, of course, my favorite music. But I do believe it's my grandmother who died when I
Oh,
was 10. But I do believe, I often hear her name. I know it may sound weird to a lot of writers, but a smell of a rose or seeing a rose, or her name was Rose. So a piece
yeah,
of music will come on that she was a pianist. So I will hear music she played. And I mean, there's nothing spooky. I'll just be reminded. I'll just be suddenly reminded
yeah,
her name was Rose. Yeah,
yeah. Oh, that's really special, isn't it?
it is. Yeah, very special.
Now, when you decided to publish, what was the process you went through in trying to find a publisher, and how was that process for you, Kez?
First publisher was shocking, absolutely shocking. I would never ever say to anybody, let's go here, because they were crooks. They really were.
Yeah.
They took money and they ran. So lesson learned. Found another publisher, and I was upset by what had happened, but I thought it's not going to stop me. So I started scrolling through publishers on my phone one night, and I came across these two
Yeah.
young men in England, in the UK, who were just
Mhm.
opening up an ebook shop.
Yeah.
So I approached them about my books, and they said, send us one. So I did, and they edited it. Not too good, because they weren't professional editors, but they did their best, and I did my best. And so it was put
Yeah.
online. And then after that, they just said to me, send us everything you've got. We have sold so many of your books.
Oh, that's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah. So that was my
That's
first foray into publishing that was prolific. I couldn't write
yes.
fast enough for them. I just couldn't write fast enough for them, but they got very, very popular, and 3 years later closed
Yes.
their doors. But meanwhile,
Oh,
no, spread my name
oh,
all over Europe. I was well known
yes,
as a writer all over Europe.
yes,
So that worked. And then, the results of polio after many years accumulated, and I
yes.
again didn't feel too well. So a publisher here, locally here, turned around and said, I can help. And she did for 3 years.
Yes.
She published 2 of my children's books and 3 paranormal, and that worked well for 3 years. But then she was not well, and so she decided to slow down her business more than anything.
Yes.
And then I met the publisher I have now. She's again local. And it was just research, and I knew about the publisher Making Magic Happen. I knew about her, but I'd never met her, and she lives 10 minutes from me. So we met up,
Yeah.
and after 2 or 3 cups of coffee at different times, we decided we'd like to work together.
Oh, that's wonderful. And
Yeah,
was that a good process? Is that a good working relationship, do you think, Kez?
that I have with Karen McDermott. Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
Karen gives you complete
yes,
freedom, complete and utter
yes,
freedom, as long as you're building your profile up, which she expects from all authors. But she
yes.
will actually do backflips to get you to bestseller, to get you out there. I mean, she was the one that said to me, come to Crom Castle. And I went, no, not for me. And
Yeah,
she went, it is for you. And from that moment
yeah,
on, from going to Crom, I have learnt
yes,
double the amount of knowledge I have now. I also gained an author's family, which you need as a writer.
yes,
Most writers, we like hermits. We like to hide away and write. But you also need someone to say, what do you think? this is my next short story, a short story for an anthology book, and we do that now. We swap between us, and I read theirs and they read mine, and it's just fabulous. What's happened is just fabulous.
That's awesome, which kind of leads us to how you and I connected and why we're doing a co-hosted show together is
Yeah.
because we feel pretty passionate about authors and their writing and the whole process rather of publishing and writing. And Kez and I connected. Kez came on my original author show, and then this has sort of come up as a passion project for both of us to help authors and writers connect with each other so that we can talk about their books, their stories, their process. You, besides writing, Kez, you also mentor and help authors now, don't you?
I do. That's a real big passion of mine, because everybody has a story. Every single person I've ever met has a story inside them. So let's get it out there. Even if it's just a short story, join an anthology group. And I encourage people, not just mine, but to find a group that's doing an anthology book, put your words into it. It's imperative that we leave something behind. And I call it a thumbprint. It's imperative we leave something behind for another generation. Who knows? Who knows where the world's going to end up in another 20 years, another 40 years, another 100 years. So if we have a time capsule there that said, my great granny or this person did that, and I can follow their footsteps, who would have thought that by being a writer, I would have formed a corridor of art and writing between Ako, Japan, and Rockingham? That was a huge eye-opener for me. I was there one day, Toni, just one day, not even 3 hours into my journey, and I met an artist who said to me, I've written a book. And I went, oh, so have I. And next thing you know, we're shaking hands. That's how quick it was. It took me a year to put the book together, but it's writing leads you into so many places. You don't know where you're going to go with it.
Here's that whole idea of having a sister city. Was that a new concept for you?
No, Rockingham, the Rockingham government here, they've always had Arco as a sister city, and I believe that it sort of died a little death for a wee while, and then I was invited to join it. I was invited to join it, and I said, this is no good. This is just no good, because I like people to say, I want to be creative, and I want to show other people that they can be creative, no matter what it is. I don't care if you bake cakes, it's creative. So that's when I went over there. They said to me, would you like to come with the committee to Arco, Japan? And I went, no. And then I went, yes. It all comes down, with me, it came down to finances. But I mean, it's expensive traveling to these places and paying for your hotel and everything. But I'm a firm believer that if you're meant to be there, you'll be there. And so I just said, I'm going. And that's it. And the same with Castle. When I finally made up my mind, I raced off to my publisher and I said, is there a bed left for me? And she went, oh, yes. So, that's, I mean, a bit of a late starter, but I got there. And, through that one trip we did, my husband and I traveled around Europe and spread the word that I was a writer. I left books behind at places. So, those contacts have come in useful.
What are some of the challenges you've faced in your writing?
In my writing, well, I've heard the word writer's block, but I don't believe it. I think it's you that stop yourself. If you just give yourself some time off, there's nothing wrong with, being a writer means you still have to live a life. You still have to do the everyday things. I still have to do the shopping. I still have to make my bed. Nobody does that for me. So one day they will, but at the moment I still live a normal everyday life. And my creative juices Look, I can be driving, and all of a sudden I think, oh, I thought of a byline to my story. I can be
Okay.
talking, I can be on a radio show, and my head's gone on a different tangent. That's a good byline. So yeah, I can do all sorts of things with my writing. And if you let it happen, you don't get the
Yes,
writer's block. Your brain can be silent because it's our brains are what they call plastic. The plasticity has
yes,
to grow. And so while
yes,
you're letting all that information in there and grow and mature, and it's like maturing cheese, you just got to let
yes,
it sit there and mature it away, and all of a sudden, bang, you've got your book. It's not hard.
yeah,
Well, for me,
yeah,
but
yeah.
some people are real agony aunts, and they take a while about it.
I know. I've talked to a few of them that have struggled, and I'm actually with you, Kez. If I make up my mind to sit and write, it generally flows pretty easily
Oh,
and free flowing.
yeah.
So you're a writer of children's books.
Yes.
What's your other genre of delight?
I have a favorite. It's called Romance Adventure, and that was my
Uh-huh.
bestseller. And that's because
Yes.
we have traveled extensively. But I also,
Yeah.
in those books, I love writing paranormal. Now, my paranormal isn't spooky,
Yes.
spooky stuff. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
realizing that we're not here alone, and things
Yeah.
do happen, and we think, oh, how did that happen? Or what was
Yeah.
that? Or
Yeah.
how did you know about that? These things pop up,
Yeah.
and I know there's other things at work. So
Yes.
whether it's the universe tapping you on the shoulder or whatever it is, my books are my favorite ones. And then after that comes paranormal. Romance, adventure, travel has just stolen my heart.
Yes. 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 There's something about travel that really opens your mind to different possibilities and different scenarios. And I have to say, this last 12 months of not being able to travel is starting to wear very thin. I'm getting
Mm,
itchy feet. For the audience listening, Australians still aren't able to travel internationally. We can travel between states, but there's different scenarios between each state.
yeah.
So most of us have kind of stayed put, haven't we, Kez?
Yep.
Kez, however, has been caravanning and doing a bit of travel in her own state. And because I know you love to explore, Kez has just come back from a little trip that was not great. Still she still gets to travel a bit. Before we get onto the next part of the show where Kez is going to interview me, which will be fantastic because I'm always on the other side of the microphone. Besides hosting this show with me, Kez, what's next? What's next in the writing sphere for you?
A movie. I've always wanted
Oh,
to make a
yeah.
movie. Mm.
Yep.
So
So you're going to
even if it's
start.
just a short movie,
Yeah, yeah. But you have to start with a screenplay, I understand, and that's a different form of writing. Is that right?
yes, that is. It's called script writing, and
Yes,
you either find a very good one that can do it for you, but
yes,
they're not cheap. And so
yes.
it's been suggested that I sit a local TAFE course, which is our universities over here, on script writing.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And I'll play with that idea until it sits on my shoulders quite well. And then who knows? Who knows from there?
How exciting is that?
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Now I'm going to hand the microphone over to Kez and let Kez take control for the first time. Now, listeners, Kez has never co-hosted a show before, and so we are going to just take this gently and organically. And I know she's going to be absolutely brilliant. Over to you, Kez.
Toni, I have so many questions for you. Your life fascinates me. Absolutely fascinating. But the first question is, what drew you to be a radio host? Because I know you were a theatre nurse. So what drew you into
Yeah,
being a radio host?
long, convoluted story, but I, as you know, wrote my memoir back in 2019. And
Yes.
previous to writing the memoir, I'd been in nursing. So I've got about 35 years of nursing experience, and the predominant place that I worked was the operating theatre. So I, scrub, scout, anaesthetics, recovery, pre-education, the whole gamut. From working in operating theatres to running operating theatres to refurbishing operating theatres. And I did that for a long time. And in 2010 or thereabouts, I segued from physical work into my own company, where I sort of zapped across Australia, making sure that day surgeries and small hospitals met the national safety and quality standards. So I went more into an assessment, auditing, um, prepping role. I did that for a number of years, and in the background of all this, I was doing my own self-discovery, healing, dealing, and sorting out some of the dysfunction that had made me chronically ill. During that time, I was diagnosed with chronic aggressive rheumatoid arthritis that saw me physically and mentally unable to do very much at all. All of that in a background of major depressive disorder and anxiety. And and this is quite a period of time. So this is a decade of intense healing, um, therapy, counseling, and coming to terms with the things that had gone on in my life and what I'd been dealt with. Skip forward to 2018, and as I'd done a fair bit of healing and a fair bit on my journey, I started to open up and talk to people tentatively about some of the things that had happened in my life. And people started to say, you need to write a book. And of course, I'd been journaling and diary noting for a fair while by that stage, because that was part of my healing process. And so I thought, oh, I don't even know how to write a book. But as the thought grew in my head, and as I allowed it to just be what it was going to be, I started to come in contact with people that were able to help me on that journey. So I partnered with a Australian publishing platform, and they are part education, part mentoring, part coaching, and they help you publish your book. So I did that. I stopped my business, my consulting, in July 2018, and I sat down and wrote for the next 5 months straight, and got the book through all the processes that a book goes through, and published in January 2019. I had no plan around what that book would do or what it would mean or what would happen. No plan at all, just that I made 2019 the year that I would say yes. I also knew that you had to start building up your book reading family and building up your profile and being on social media and all of that, which I did. And I also went on to do the audio version of the book, and I was going to get an actress to voice and narrate my book, because I'm quiet and introverted, and I still didn't have the best self-esteem. And during that process, the producer was just so amazingly supportive and wonderful. So a big shout out to Simone from Brisbane Audiobook Production, who got me through that process, through tears, because speaking out your book is very different from
It
writing
is.
it. It's
Yes,
a
it is.
different process,
Yeah.
and I was unprepared for the emotion that would come from speaking out
Oh,
those chapters live. So she was very gentle, and it was very healing and cathartic. And at the end of it, she sat me down and said, do you realize that you have a beautiful voice, a voice for radio? Have you thought about podcasting? And I'm like, no way, no how, not going to happen. Doing this audio book, that's it, enough for me. So I kept busily doing my marketing of the book and talking to people and being interviewed and et cetera, et cetera. and I had a chance connection with a media company in the States. And from that, we had a conversation, and he answered a lot of my questions about podcasting and introduced me to live streaming radio. And as it was my year of saying yes, I said yes. And he offered me a show on the platform, which was based in Florida, called the Women for Women's Network, and Radio Toni was born. Now, the Radio Toni logo and name was actually spur of the moment, because he said to me, "What do you want to call your show?" And I'm like, "I have no idea. Radio Toni." And that's what it's been ever since. So no thought, no plan, and Radio Toni was born. And as I started that process, the first 6 months, I was physically sick before each show, because I had no confidence. I wasn't sure of what I was doing. It was completely out of my comfort zone and completely different to anything I'd ever done. And at that stage, I was just doing audio streaming. So no video, nothing, just audio streaming. And I taught myself everything that I needed to know to do that. And from there, Radio Toni, Toni TV, audio streaming, video streaming has just grown into this wonderful space. And I developed this love of using this type of media to connect with people and help them tell their stories. And again, that comes back to why Kez and I are partnered together to do this show, because we're both passionate about telling people's stories. And this sort of media is one of the best platforms for doing that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Next question. You've just about given it all away. Well, we've covered 3 of those questions anyway in that little story. So why is it important for the public to share their voice? What's so important about it?
So for me, I was told to be quiet. I was told to not tell. I was told to be quiet and not speak. So the discovery that I could speak and that it was my God-given right to speak and tell my truth was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And I discovered that lots of other people don't know that they can speak. And Kez, you would know what's happening in Australia today with lots of women starting to speak up and tell their truth. So the belief behind that is that by storytelling or speaking our truth, we shed light on darkness, secrets, and lies. And when we shed light on those stories, they cease to have power over our life. They cease to be painful, and you open yourself up to more healing, more joy than you ever thought was possible.
Exactly.
So I can tell you the person that I was and the pain that I lived in and the fear that I lived in, and simply telling my story, for good or bad, has released me from that. So now I can freely say, yeah, sure, I suffer from depression. It's managed, but I know that it will be with me forever and a day. And if I'm game enough to talk about that, that helps someone who's listening, who's struggling with that diagnosis and living with depression, to know that it's okay. It's okay to have that diagnosis. It's okay to live with it. And it's very okay to talk about it, because by talking about it, you help people help themselves. I'm sure
So would you,
sorry, you go.
So would you say that, see, some people like yourself and myself, we're quiet. We're quite quiet until we're given an audience, and then we have to raise our voice. So my audience is in readers and doing different little podcasts all around the world. I mean,
Yeah.
2 nights ago I was speaking in India. So, and it's just through doing what we're doing, but nothing is, should I say, as close to the people that you meet. Nothing is closely. Your voice is well and truly heard. But I've read your book, and that's well and truly. I haven't listened to the ebook, but I actually read your book, and there's so much power in words. I wrote my book, and I think all writers have to be very aware of the fact that if you write a book about yourself, about your life, you are going to suddenly lose friends and family. That's a big warning thing that most people won't even approach. I don't want to lose them. So that's a decision you have to make. And also the genre you write in. My passion is to, like yourself, is to bring people out and say, you have a voice, let's use it. So in your life, we've already learned what was your drive to write your book. So what advice would you give to a younger Toni?
Oh gosh. Number one, I would have been kinder to myself. First and foremost, I used to beat myself up so badly. So I didn't need the world beating me up because I did it myself. So number one would be you need to be kinder to yourself. I wish that I'd given myself permission to seek help sooner. So Kez, that I didn't seek help for my depression, anxiety, and dysfunction until I had a breakdown in my 40s. That's too long to wait. If you're struggling in your teens, seek, get help, talk to someone. There's so much available now, and there should never, ever be any stigma or judgment about seeking help, because humans are wired that way. We are wired for connection. And if you're struggling within yourself around, say, depression, and I'll use depression because that's my own personal experience. If you're struggling and thinking that you're alone, you need to talk to someone, because you are never, ever, ever alone. There's always someone out there to help and help you get through it. But you've got to get over yourself, and you've got to get over that fear.
Get over yourself.
Get over yourself, get over your fear. That's the other thing that I would say to the younger Toni is just get over yourself. This is at the end of the day, this is not about you. This is about helping so many other people, which is the bigger driver.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that don't be afraid of family that judge you, because family are your genetic connection. But that doesn't mean that they're going to support you in what you do and what you say. And they don't have to. If you believe in yourself and honour that belief in yourself and do what you absolutely feel is right in your soul, then do that. It doesn't actually matter what they think about you. Yes, be careful about how you write. Be careful of the words that you use. But at the end of the day, they're only going to respond to you from their place of healing and understanding. And if they've not reached the same level as you've reached, they're never going to understand. And you can't make them, and you shouldn't expect them. That's your experience too.
I think we have to realise too that it could be in the DNA. So the people that the family that you've involved in your writing may also be struggling with what you've got, which is I suffer with anxiety. So and I've got arthritis as well. So
yes,
I think after beating myself up for many, many years, it was acknowledging the fact that this could be, it's not just me, it's DNA. I've watched people in my family suicide. Why? Because they wouldn't talk to anyone. So writing and doing the radio, Toni, for you was cathartic. As for me, writing is cathartic. Yeah. So the next question is, what sort of goal do you want to reach before the end of 2021?
I read this question and I thought, oh my goodness gracious me. So I guess, and again, I still get a little anxious sharing some things with the audience, but I think it's really important that people understand why you do what you do. So I'm going to share with the audience what I call my BHAG, or big, fat, hairy goal. So something that is so scary and so big that it terrifies you. So here's mine. I want to provide an opportunity for all those that have the courage to rise above their individual trauma, to actualize their dreams denied to them by injustice. So that big goal drives everything else that I do. And of course, for me, that's around having a successful business. It's about inspiring and empowering and educating and helping people. So one of my biggest drivers, of course, is helping people. I'm incredibly generous, but I want to be more generous. So to do that, you have to be really successful in business to be really generous. So that's what drives me, to be really
Yes.
successful so I can give back and fulfill those ideas of a philanthropic life.
Mm.
And I guess for 2021, that's growing Radio Toni and Toni TV to reach more people, gain
Yeah.
a bigger audience, and help more people,
Yeah.
put more people in front of others so that their individual challenges or what's giving them pain, I help to solve that for them.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. It's absolutely amazing what you're doing, helping other people grow and use their voice. So from all the people in the past that haven't said thank you, I'm going to say thank you for them. It's very important we get it out there, that to be able to speak is, a lot of people, I mean, doing what we're doing right now would be cringing. And it does take, you have to really grab yourself by the back of the neck and think, I can do this. And for some
Yeah,
people, it's a breeze. It's an absolute breeze. They just haven't realized it yet. And I think it's our
yeah,
job to help them realize
yeah,
that everything is possible. But I also agree on what you said, that to be able to be philanthropic, was it philanthropic? Yes.
yes, that's the word.
You need to have a successful business. And I, like yourself, have said to many, oh no, look, I know you're struggling. I will help. But at the end of the day, it's you that ends up struggling, because you're thinking, well, how am I going to pay for the food this week? So yeah, it's never gotten that bad with us yet. But it's you do have to have a successful business so you can help others. Now, when I first started my business, I said, right, I'm going to do 2 freebies a year. And
Yes,
so for the last 5 years, I have given my time to, and especially the young ones coming up
yeah,
that know they can run a
yeah,
business. I work with them. Yeah, and they're published. I don't pay for any of the publishing, but working with me for a year, it sets them on the road to get their words onto paper. Or even in the art world, I will teach you
yes,
the simple basic things of art. Over the COVID period, I had lots of seniors. Um, they were terrified of what was going to happen. Are we going to die? Was one of the, and I was
oh,
very blasé about it, but I saw the
yeah,
fear. I was safe. My backyard is a beautiful backyard, and I just thought, why not run something for the seniors here? And they were all masked up and gloved up, and we had all the right
yes,
things, and but I taught them how to do some very simple artwork and write, and this and journal. Well, not write a book, but we journaled, and that's very
yes,
important to us, journaling your feelings. So, Toni, the next question for you is, um, the bigger dream than the end of the year, the bigger dream than, and you know deep down what it is. Are you prepared to share it with us?
as you know, Kez, I love to write. So I would really love to be writing more books. So I've got a couple of co-authored books coming out this year, but I have a part of my healing journey was to tap into some of those childlike things that we let go of as adults. So one of those is imagination, and I would love to write from an imaginative perspective stories about my animals, for instance, my beloved
Oh,
goats,
beautiful.
and
Yes,
their personalities and the things that they do that give us joy and happiness in our everyday lives.
yeah,
So there's that, and I'd love to write a wide sweeping fantasy saga. And of course, I too would love to delve into the script writing movie genre as well. So all of that. But I love what I do. So the growth of Radio Tony and Toni TV and helping as many people to leverage streaming media is is another passion for me. So
mm,
the co-hosting, when I get to work with someone and co-create a show, that's my passion. I love co-creating, and that's about me and the other person and creating something bigger than the both of us.
yes,
So
yeah,
for partnering with Kez like that, just that lights up my life. And to be able
mm,
to do it around the genre of writing and books and publishing is a real gift, I think, because so many people have so many stories, and there's so many ways that you can have those stories published now. People, we see that we can educate people about how to do it. You know,
that's right. Yes,
it we will have better humanity the more real stories that we continue to tell. Don't you think, Kez?
mm, I do. I do. I think we are walking stories, literally.
Yes,
So why not put them onto something that people can to read and aspire to? And that's the biggest
yes,
thing is knowing that there could be someone out there that says, I want to aspire in my life to be in your shoes one day. What a compliment that is. But not only
yes,
you may have saved a person, you may have saved a person's mental health. And that's
yes.
huge with me because I also believe that a lot of our illnesses start in our mental health. So, if you don't cure your mental health, it will go into the body. It's the body
Do you know,
screaming, I
Kez?
need some attention.
Yes. Do you know one of the biggest compliments I received after I wrote the book was from a 78-year-old gentleman who wrote me a little email and said, I've just read your book, and your book has given me the courage to talk about my abuse from childhood. He
Mm,
was that at that age and had never told anyone.
mm,
So even at that age, um, we emailed. I said, this is what you need to start doing, and this is the process for starting to do it. And I don't put myself out as a mentor or coach, but I'm happy to say, well, this is what I did, and this is how it works, and here's some people to connect with
yeah,
to get your book published. But that one gentleman being able to help him come to terms with what had happened in his childhood and be able to walk, read, and talk about it before his death. What a
yeah,
gift, Kev. Like,
yes,
what a gift.
yeah. I also find that it's the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds that need to tell
Yeah,
their story. Really do need to tell it. Now, as you know, in my childhood, it was be seen and not heard. But
yes,
my dad would say to me, look, go sit. I had a cushions under a very big, long, old farm kitchen table in my childhood house. And I think I lived there. It was my little hut.
yeah,
I knew everybody's
yeah.
feet off by heart. I didn't know their faces too well, but I knew what sort of shoes they were. And I knew their
Mm,
voices. And I would listen. Now, my dad had 4 Irish brothers, and my mother was an
yeah,
English Jew. So I heard these stories. I heard the saddest of stories. I heard the
yeah,
heartbreaking stories. And being a
yeah,
child, I didn't understand what it was all about. but now I do.
Yeah.
That they didn't write it, but there was family communication. Okay, there was a few drinks involved when my father was concerned. They'd all get very maudlin over their whiskey. But yeah, it was listening to my mother and her Saturday morning women's meetings, and all my aunties and cousins. They would talk about, you see, Dad would talk about the old country, the island he knew.
Yes.
My mother would talk about how dreadful married life was. And I used to get all these conflicting stories. And I also, I learned about marriage, and I learned about the inside of marriage and the outside of marriage. I won't go into that, but I learned a lot about marriage. And I learned about the conflict between a husband and a wife, and conflict between how tired a mother got with all the children.
Yeah.
This is what you learn, and you would have learnt that too. That this is, they didn't write, they spoke, but we just do it differently these days.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a place in for writers, books, and writing.
Yes.
Always. We have modern ebooks and we have audio books, but essentially they're still books. They're written by authors. They tell stories, and humans are connected by stories. So we will keep telling them, and we will keep helping people write and get their ideas down on paper, because it's important. It's important for the generations that follow on after us. So, Kez, we're almost out of time, my lovely co-host. I just want to remind everyone that this will be a weekly show for Kez and I. And this week, you've heard a little bit about each of us. And from next week, we will start to include authors on our show who will be interviewed by the two of us. And coming up next week is a friend of mine from the US called Robert Fulton, and he wrote a memoir about Up in the Air. So he'll be coming up live next week. But Kez and I will be on every week at the same time, and we will continue to co-host for at least the rest of the year, hopefully. And if you want to connect with us, jump on and email Kez at author@Kez Wickham St George or info@radiotoni.com. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know what you think about an author/artist specific show where we talk to the creators of humanity. And if you'd like to see anything in particular each week, and join us next week live on the show. Thank you, Kez, my beautiful co-host. We look forward to joining you. We look forward to joining you again next week. And that's us for this week. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Good evening, America, and good afternoon, Australia. Welcome back to Radio Toni, and this is the next in a series of very special shows with my wonderful friend, Michelle Slay. And for those of you listening online on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, Teo from the Philippines is listening in to grab your comments, answer your questions, and forward you any links. Just a reminder that this show will be talking about powerful subjects, and I want you to reach out and talk to someone if you need to at any stage. We also have links that Payo can put in the live comments that will help you with anything that you're struggling with today. Now, my beautiful guest has just written a best-selling book, and this is the second in our series of shows having a frank, open, honest, and vulnerable conversation about sexual assault. Now, Michelle is an empowered survivor, and she knows the difference between being empowered and just surviving. She's done both. Michelle was the victim of 6 rapes and 1 sexual assault, beginning at the age of 5 years old, and has experienced the persecution and the challenges of her permanent, painful work-related injury. She's been stalked and powerless and has lost some people close to her through domestic murder. Now, Michelle helps people stop being at the mercy of their trauma and triggers, and she is an advocate for change in the sexual assault culture. And she set from her own experienced sexual assault in 1997, set a legal precedent around sexual assault. Her best-selling book, Insight, Up Close and Personal Profile of Sexual Assault, will help communities to better identify to the trauma of sexual assault. Now, I have to mention today that currently in Australia, for our American and worldwide listeners, there has been a real rise in the women of Australia saying enough is enough. We have marched on Parliament, and at the moment we are awaiting, shall we say, an engaged response from our Prime Minister. I know for one that many of the women that I talk to are not willing to let this go this time. We need change for our daughters, granddaughters, and great-granddaughters, and this time we want to make it happen. So good afternoon, Michelle.
Hi, Toni. How are you?
I'm good. We're a little bit soggy and wet. And that's the I said we're a little bit soggy and wet because you know Australia drought 1 minute and flooding rain the next.
Yes.
But otherwise we're really good.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yes, sorry, you keep going.
last week we told the audience about your powerful story and what you're now working on and what you hope to achieve in the future. And this week we wanted to tackle the difficult topic of childhood sexual abuse. Now, Michelle knows firsthand how that plays out in the lives of children, and we thought that we'd start right there and talk to you about Michelle's experience, what it looks like, and how it played out in her life so that people can get a glimpse into the type of trauma that these crimes commit.
Yeah. Yeah, Toni, you know, the interesting thing is that a young boy got onto Facebook from a school here in Brisbane, and he talked about how men should, his friends, how the boys in his school, other boys, men should step up and be more respectful of women. And he asked some questions, you know, how can it be that still today this is still happening, and why is it still happening? And, you know, the answer to that is really very simple. It's not well understood. And so when we talk about sexual assault on children, it becomes quite difficult because you've got several things going on. And one of them is that children don't understand what's actually happening to them, right? So they don't have any context with which to be able to make sense of anything. So right through life, we learn things. We learn a lot from our parents. and we learn a lot from our experiences. But let's face it, stubbing our toe, or, you know, going to school and beginning to read, or a whole range of things are very different to the topic that we're talking about. And sexual assault can begin in the crib. Depending on the predator, it can begin with newborn children who will have an experience that they are not able to understand, and it will remain stored in their body. And it will come back and it will later affect them in their life. But it will also, as we spoke last week, make them more vulnerable to other predators, right? And so the thing about it is that we can very easily, you know, say to someone, or, you know, if anyone touches my kid, or if anyone touches you, but what does that actually mean to a child? We have to really think about it in terms of the children. And, you know, when I gave birth to my daughter, I was incredibly grateful for my history. And I was grateful for it because I had actually bothered to learn about it and study it and pull it apart and analyze it. And I'd found answers. And it meant that I could raise my daughter knowing that I can't stop her from being sexually assaulted, but I can give her language, forms of communication and dialogue to be able to tell me if something happens, but also I can educate her about the fact that these people exist. And the key to it is really doing that without bringing emotion into it, because when we bring emotion into something, we're determining whether it's good or bad. And we don't want children learning something that it's bad, so when it happens to them, they're bad. We want them to understand that this is not about them. This is about somebody else who's got a problem, and it will make us feel bad inside. However, we're not bad, right? So it's really important when you think about children and sexual assault to realize that it's right from the beginning when they're born, and they pick up on what we think and we say and we do. So whatever we think and we believe, they're going to as well. So we need to really ask ourselves, with the statistics that we have, and Toni, you've got some here, that, you know, it's actually really tragic that you've pulled up. I'm just going to put my glasses on and just review this, because I think it's really very sad when you think about it. 1 billion children aged 2 to 17 have experienced either physical, sexual, or emotional violence or neglect in the past. That's too many children. So whatever we're doing right now, it's not right and it's not enough, right? So that's a lot. That's terrible. So 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys in the US. That's terrible. Here in Australia, it's something like 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 15 boys. The statistics vary depending on which site you're on. However, it's a problem. And in my book, I go into you know, to this because we've got a different name for people who rape children to what we have for other people. And so we call them sexual this or that or the other, but a lot of the time we call them sexual perpetrators. Now, a perpetrator suggests somebody who's done something wrong. What we need to understand is that these people hunt, they are predators. We need to start, and I call them sexual predators for a very particular reason. And so you have to think to yourself, this person is hunting a vulnerable child. That vulnerability can equate to something whereby they have access. That vulnerability can relate to something whereby, whereby they, are sort of alone somewhere in a playground and the parents are distracted. That vulnerability can be a whole range of things, right? So also at the same time, children are getting exposed sometimes to domestic violence and domestic rape in the home, or physical and verbal. They're getting exposed to these things. And, you know, you get kids who will then be fragile or vulnerable because they retract into themselves because they're trying to make sense of what's going on in the home. They're a predator's dream. You know, you've got to think about, when you think about protecting your child or educating your child, you need to look at it from the other side. Who's the person that's hunting your child? That's really hard to swallow, right? Now, I know who was hunting my children. And even then, one kind of slipped in. He never got near my kids because of the things that I put into place. He never got access to them on that level. But they are there, and they're looking for your children. They're looking for my children. They're looking for everyone's children. And they could be the person you're married to. They could be the person that was your father who never touched you. They could be your uncle that never touched you. They could be your husband's mother, father, brother, sister, or relative, right? They are anywhere and everywhere. So that's a really big pull to start trying to sift out, well, how do we manage something like that, right? That's huge. And the simple answer is that we need to be more aware of what a sexual predator actually is. So I talked last week very openly, and I talk about it in my book, about the fact that the person who the first memory I have of being sexually assaulted at the age of 5 was from an extended relative and came into my world, not regularly every week, but reasonably often. And in the book, I do talk about how one of my other cousins, you know, who was being ushered to go outside because he was out there looking after the kids, go and play. And when she looked out the same window as her mother, she saw something that her mother didn't see. She didn't see a grown man with a child on his knee, tickling him and having his hands on his legs and having his hands different places. But my cousin did. She saw something very different to her mother, right? Because would you send your child outside if you'd seen what my cousin had seen? No. So she hid under the sofa for the most of the day to stay away because she just felt that, oh my goodness, you know, what is that? And when I began to write this book, I was contacted by a different family member, and they were telling me that somebody else who he had assaulted many, many years later, and who actually told someone quite accidentally about him, and he was taken to court, and that there was some sort of scrapbook being made. And so I sort of reached out to a few people within the family to see if I could get a copy of the scrapbook. And, you know, I spoke to so many people, and you know what they say? You know, I can't believe he did that. You know, I still can't, because I loved him so much. And I've spoken to family members who have said to me, you know what? I loved that man. I worshipped the ground that he walked on, and he did it to me. And he said, and she said, because he crossed gender, that they just couldn't, they knew that he'd done it to them, but they couldn't make sense of it because they loved him so much. And so they are extremely loved people. They are extremely charismatic. You know, this is something that they have to be to get away with what they do. And so this is what they are. And so for a parent to go up against their family, to say this person that everybody loves is doing these things, that's really hard, even for them to figure out that that's happening. So we're not always looking out or on the lookout for signs. What we are is we see that everybody else likes people, so we kind of do growing up, and we continue that on. Yeah. So Toni, I can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'll just keep going. Right. Yeah. So it's really quite important that as parents or prospective parents, that we are aware that they are everywhere, and that they're going to be telling our children that people shouldn't touch them certain places. They're going to be using our language. They're going to be doing what we do because they want to build that trust. And we were having a conversation during the week, Toni, about how you did that very thing in the car. So you were sharing how...
Yes, I'm hoping you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. Yes, yeah.
So
it's good to share this with the people.
We absolutely. So I was brought up with a certain amount of stranger danger discussion, not in depth and not around language that made much sense to me. And I vowed that I would have better conversations with my children. However, we lived with a sexual predator, and I was about to marry a sexual predator. And unbeknownst to me, he still got to my daughter. And we had those conversations. And the conversation that Michelle makes reference to is the one where I had the kids in the car. They would have been 11 and 9 perhaps. And I had a talk about the right of their body to not allow people to touch it in a way that made them feel uncomfortable. And I thought that was enough, but I'm telling you, it's not. And here's the discussion that Michelle and I had during the week. We need to have the language, and I'm going to hand back over to Michelle because she's an expert in talking about the language that we use to teach and educate our children.
Yeah. So we do need to tell children. I said to mine, you know, if mummy does something that makes you feel uncomfortable, you must tell me or daddy or granny or somebody, because you know whether or not you feel comfortable and okay inside. If you're not sure, that's something that you need to talk to someone about. It's not saying that I'm bad. It's helping you make sense of it. So yeah, if daddy does something, if someone else does something, it's not saying they're bad. It's saying that you're not okay or comfortable with it. Now, I remember we were living in Darwin, and I was basically a single mum because my husband worked away. And yeah, we talked about this too, Toni. Women who don't have a man around a lot are certainly someone that sexual predators, pedophiles prey on. Because of the secondary gains that we have, and I'll circle back to that in a moment, but I went to this doctor's surgery, and there was a doctor there. He was lovely. Everyone thought he was great. I went, I took my kids. He had lots of pictures up on the wall of children sitting on his knee, and he's got his arms wrapped around them, and, you know, they're laughing and he's laughing, and he had the little thing of lollies on the counter. And I remember him saying to my children, oh, come sit on my knee. And I said, no, they'll sit here on the chair because that's the appropriate thing to do. I keep trying to turn this down. Anyway, so he kept asking, and I kept saying no, and he kept offering them lollies, and I kept saying, no, we don't take lollies from people that aren't mum and dad. And I thanked him very nicely, but he kept it up, and he became more and more insistent. And so I said to him, and I said this in a very calm and polite way, I said, I can appreciate that, you know, you want the children to feel comfortable here in the surgery, you know, but what you're doing is behavior of someone who's pedophile. And my children do not sit on people's knees because it is not okay to sit on people's knees. They sit on the chair because that's safe. And I'm teaching my children to be safe. They do not take lollies from people. If I want them to have lollies, I will buy them inside the supermarket, and then we take them home and we have them. I said, my children do not take lollies out of containers. It doesn't matter who's offering them. Yeah. And he said no more. And I left, and I had been looking at this growing wall of pictures, and where he had hands on their legs, and, you know, just different things that I didn't like. So I rang the police and I said, okay, there may be nothing in this. However, I want you to be aware in case somebody else rings. Yeah. they can actually build a list of people. And I think this is one of the things that we really need to be aware of is what's the relationship that other people are trying to create with us and our children? And is it a relationship that is saying that this person is allowed to touch my child's legs? And you might think, oh, that's nothing. Well, actually it is. It is something.
Yes.
Because if you think it's okay for people to manage children in a certain way, when someone is doing things inappropriate, you will not see it.
Yeah.
Because you will block it out. So we have this way of processing information because we have so much coming towards us. It's a little bit of basic psych here. And for things that fall within our scope of conscious thinking, it goes into our unconscious. But where it's something that we haven't sort of got a plan, a strategy, or a way of thinking, or it's different to the way of thinking that we have, we delete it or distort it or generalize it. So the meaning is lost, right? So we actually do that on an unconscious level. We're not aware we're doing it. And so the meaning is lost. So this is really important to understand, because you need to think consciously and have a plan. On my website, I have plans about what to do. But I also advocate, have a plan about what is and isn't going to be an acceptable message that you're telling your children. Every time you see someone interact with your child and you don't respond, you're telling them it is okay for someone to do this to me. So think about that. And is that something that you think they should think anyone can do to them? Or do you need to say, Mum can do that, no one else? Or, you know what I mean?
Michelle, you're talking about things of quite a personal nature. So simple things like taking a child to the toilet, that should only be done by mum or dad in the first instance.
And I told my children, if I ever touch you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, you must tell someone, either gran or dad or me. So I never made it that they couldn't question what I did.
Yes.
Because if I do that, and I'll share a story with you that is really scary. If I do that, then I set them up to not communicate with someone that they think is safe. So we moved into a little place called Gladstone here in Queensland. And I ran a police check to see if there were any registered sex offenders. That's the best that I can do. And there were none in my area. So the neighbouring suburb, which was literally across the train station, train rails, you know. A week after we moved in and I'm driving to the supermarket, I hear on the radio this grandmother had been arrested for kidnapping her grandchildren after school and kidnapping them and locking them up so that her new partner could have access to them.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So you see, if I'm saying it's all right for Gran to do something or someone else to do something, then I'm giving them the wrong message. If I'm saying, you know how you feel inside, if you don't feel comfortable inside about something, don't do it. And this is what you do. Give them options. Go and tell somebody. You know, so if someone's not acting properly, they're acting a bit strange, they don't sound right, don't do someone because you've trusted them before. Reach out.
We talked about this in generic terms, but I think I want to just clarify for the audience that this is teaching your children about their instinct or their gut feeling, because it's always right.
Yes. That's exactly right.
Yes, that feeling as a child, absolutely will protect them, won't it, Michelle?
It will. It will go a long way. So there's our conscious mind, and then there's our unconscious mind, and then there's our intuition, that little voice.
Yes.
We call it our higher mind. And then we have our instinct. And our instinct and our intuition are not impaired by the unhelpful beliefs and decisions that we file away in our unconscious mind that drive our everyday conscious thinking, right? So your instinct is a way, it's consciously aware and picking up on things that your conscious mind is not processing. So if your children feel something, then it's important that they feel confident that they can act on it. Yes. The other thing is that it's got to be on how they feel, not on us and what we think. So I made it really clear to my kids all along, I'm not infallible. I might miss something you pick up on. You know what's right inside, right? But I also said about teaching them what sexual predators are. And when I didn't talk about sex, especially when they were toddlers, right? I didn't talk about
You don't need to, because they don't understand.
That's right. That there are people out there who have had difficulties and who do things that hurt other people. They get that. They understand that.
Yes.
That's simple. And if they do something to hurt you, you need to tell me so that I can help the sadness that you feel inside, and so that you can be happy. Because if you don't tell me, you'll just put it, like you'll bury it in the garden, you know, like dogs bury their bones, and then it will come later, and then it will really upset you, and that might make it worse when you get older. And we don't want that, do we? No. And they'll tell you no.
Yeah.
So you want to be happy, you tell mummy what happens, and then mummy can explain it to you. And if it's a bad person, then mummy can help you with that too, right? Because you know, we may not be able to protect them, but we may then be able to step in to help them. Very important.
Or lessen the impact.
It lessens the impact, but also when we're doing this discussion, leaving aside all emotion. I just spoke about it like it was simple. Like, do you want spaghetti bolognese or lasagna for dinner? Keep it simple, because for them, it's got to, they're learning something new, and it needs to be simple, right? And if, you know, if people say, "Oh, anyone touch you, you just tell me and I'll have them," right? Whoa, what are you actually communicating in that? Well, first of all, it's all about you, and you better not get this wrong. If they touch you, I'm going to have them. You don't want dad or mum or someone to get in trouble. And that's a great, it's a great manipulative tool that they use. Is if you go and tell anyone, you'll get into trouble, and so will your parents, right?
Yeah.
So it is a manipulative tool. You need to look at how you can give it to them simply and privately. So my children were never allowed to question me in public, right? If they came and they asked me, "Can I stay over at someone's house?" And I said, "Oh, today that doesn't suit, we'll think about it another time," they knew right from word go not to question, because I explained to them there might be things that I know that they don't know. And I don't want to say it out loud, but I want to keep them safe. And so I'll tell them when we get home. And I always told them and gave them something in a context that was age appropriate. That way they trusted my judgment. They knew that they would get learning from it, the understanding from it. And so if I said something, they knew, oh, okay, mum knows something, and this is about me being safe, right? And they didn't carry on because they knew. But I told them right from little, right? So that when they got to that age where they might pester, they knew not to, and they knew why. So it's a big responsibility that we have in raising our children. And
we certainly do.
We need to really step up to this one, because, you know, you've got to think about this. Do you want to find your daughter with a car wrapped around a tree, high as a kite? Do you want to find your son with a needle hanging out of his arm? You know, what is it that you want to prevent now for your child? Because those are just two examples of an outcome, right? sadly, there's a whole lot.
There is.
Yeah, there's a lot. And things that seem to be tame, that aren't. You know, some people help themselves. Other people go and get someone to do it for them. They you know what I mean? It might be that they go and get tattoos, or they'll go and find something where they can have pain inflicted upon them to try and, you know, there's a number of things.
Get rid of the pain that they're feeling.
Yeah, deal with that and punish themselves, and you know, there's a whole range of psychology with that, or psychology that goes with it, right? Which, so we want to actually be two things: the educator for our children, and if we're not a sexual predator, we want to be that person they come to, that they can reach out, so that we can actually give them the help that they might need. Yeah. Now, I mentioned last week about a couple that were on a site that I was on helping people, and their children had been assaulted by what I refer to in my book as the classic predator. The classic predator is someone that is a stranger. You do not know them, and this chap came in through the roof. And they just didn't know what to do. And they're like, oh, we hope that they will forget. And I'm like, you can never ask someone who's experienced this to forget. And I said it in my speech last week when I did my official launch.
Yes.
I tell you now, you leave your children absolutely mentally vulnerable in such a terrible way and a scary way that when it comes back, and it always comes back. I've never met anyone where it hasn't. Always. It comes back to get you when you're not expecting it. And if you don't know why or what it is, if you don't know where it's come from, and you're experiencing something that makes no sense to you, then you know what? That's horrific. And the fear that is associated with that, it's heart stopping. You hold your breath, you can't breathe, right? And then what do you do with that? So you're at work, you run into the toilet, you don't know why, you are suddenly feeling ill, the world is spinning, you're having an anxiety attack, you go to the doctor, he gives you some tablets, it still keeps happening, but hey, you know, I've got anxiety, so I'm taking the tablets, so it's okay now because someone's rubber stamped it. No, it's not actually, but also we don't want that. We want our children to have the resources and the resilience to be able to say, okay, I was assaulted, this happened, and this is probably where it's coming from. Oh, mum, it's happening again. I'm just going to, you know, reach out. I'm just going to reach out and find someone that can help me to sort of, you know, look at this little bit that's going on, right? So that it's not something that they don't know. And then the memories start to come back, you know, and it's like, you think, oh my God, he's bury it deeper. A lot of people just really bury it deeper. And when it comes back the next time, it's even worse. And they look at their life and they're like, oh, a lady who was 83 years of age came to sit in the audience when I spoke last week. And she met me afterwards, and she said to me that she'd been assaulted when she was a child. She's now 83 and financially well off. However, she said, I look back at my life and I see that event destroyed my life. The misery and the pain and the suffering and what I've missed out on in my life in terms of connections and relationships, she said, it destroyed my life, all from that one event. And I never realized it was happening. I didn't see it until I sat down recently and looked back and realized where it came from and what it's done and what that's meant for me and my family and everything. So, you know, please don't ever hope that your children will forget, because you're just setting them up.
Or get over it.
Well, you never get over it. So, you know, we might fall over and we might get a little graze on our knee, and we put a bit of Dettol and a Band-Aid and it heals. This is where I sometimes have a bit of an issue about the word healing.
Yeah.
Because we never heal. How can we heal? The only thing we can do is evolve. That's a healing process, and that it's an empowerment process. And that's why I use the language that I use when I'm speaking.
Yes.
I try to get people to understand that we can never, ever, you know, you get a graze or a cut, you put your Band-Aid on, you never see it. It's not there anymore. No, this will never be the case. You will always have a memory in your body, I do, of each and every cell that I'm for. And when you think about it, you know, that's understandable given what's happened. So the best that you can do is evolve, is take that experience, make it work for you, make it work for your children, help them. Right? So, you know, if you're not sort of being proactive, then the children are going to put up walls. They're going to resent you. You're not going to have this nice relationship with your children. And that's really sad too, you know, because my walls are up so high, I couldn't even get through them for a long time. But I lost connection with my family. And that was really sad. You know, I think about that and I think, well, that's sad that, you know, that's what the cost was. So you parents, you know, if something's happened to your child, firstly, take a deep breath. Ask yourself, am I equipped to actually deal with this? And unless you've got a history and you've resolved it and you're like in a place where I'm at, or you've got extensive training, then I would say that you are not in a position to be able to help your child. And even myself, I actually got coaches for my children, specific ones, specific things. And a lot of people that are in sort of the social work area would get somebody else, because you've got to be mum and dad. And mum and dad's role in this is to have hugs, is to say, I love you, is to say that whatever has happened, babe, we're going to make it okay. Right? You can come and talk to us anytime. Please, I beg you, do not ever say to them, it's all right, you'll forget about it soon. Or, oh, it's okay, look, you know, you'll be all right. Please don't say that.
It's in the past. Leave it in the past. You know, those words are not helpful.
And it will never be in the past, because it's now, and it's now part of your life story. Depending on how those around you and you yourself as a child understand that part of your life story will determine how that life story moves forward.
Continues. Yes,
you know. So here's a story. This is a sad story. So grab a tissue. I was speaking with a friend, a fellow coach who works in a similar area, because I also work in domestic violence, which you find a lot of sexual assault in. And her friend, a lady she knows, daughter was assaulted. She's in her early teens, and she was starving herself, so anorexia, taking, you know, bulimia, and just a whole range of different things, sneaking alcohol, you know, all these sort of things that she was doing. And mum had had her to the psychologist and the psychiatrist, and they'd had her in the hospital, and then she's on these drugs, and it was continuing, and it was just like a revolving door. And my friend said, take her, I know someone who can actually really help your daughter, who's been through this at your daughter's age, and who can help, and gave her my number. And she didn't ever reach out. So my friend, another time when she caught up with her, said, oh, did you ever reach out to that lady? And she said, no, I can get treatment for free this way. So it's been on, I don't know how many, they'd been trying different pills for depression and anxiety to try and make all this behavior stop.
Yeah.
It was months ago. She was back in hospital being force-fed. So, this is another thing. You've got to look at this and say, this mother probably really loves her daughter and doesn't realize that redrawing on her mortgage might save her daughter's life, but she would never think that because she's been raised to think that you just get over the problem and you shouldn't. We take our car into get service, right? We pay quite a lot of money to keep our car on the road, but we don't keep a lot of money to keep ourselves on the road, and it's our brain that drives us. That's right. Everything that we experience. So, you know, really look at when you've got to make that decision as a parent, what is the outcome? And I spoke about this in my speech as well. If someone's making a referral, because we always usually end up at the GP, right? If someone's making a referral, ask them, what's the outcome going to be for that? What's that person going to offer? If someone steps up and they say, oh, okay, take these pills, see how that goes. Really? See how that goes? Well, no, I don't want to take your pills. If I'm going to take pills, I want to take pills that you can tell me what I can expect each and every day, each week, and when I will be off them and I'll be feeling better. If you ask them that, say that will never happen. And that's the truth. Right? But we need to be questioning. If we're going to our counsellor, and I know women that are exhausted, I know men that are exhausted from this, and it's just a constant regurgitation of their pain. I understand the concept around loosening the grip and helping people see something from a different perspective and expanding our map of the world. And that is very important. However, when you ask a child or someone that's an adult that was assaulted as a child, so you're asking that child, that person who is that child really, to expand their map of the world, and they've got no resources to do that, that's not a possibility for them. So we really have to really look at what are the options that I might like to go down. I mean, I'm one option, but you know, you might find a different option. But always monitor. Monitor before they start. Okay, so here's the difficulty. What's the plan? Have a structure, have a plan forward, have strategies. One of the biggest things that people who have been sexually assaulted need is a strategy that is not an abusive one, right?
Yes.
So we need a new strategy. And always, and I think I might have mentioned this last week, the strategy of think, act, observe the outcome. How do I feel about that? Okay, I'll tweak that response for next time. Is a process by which we can have more structured sort of outcomes, that because we're not coming from emotion. But when you're faced with a child who is very angry and who's hurting themselves and who is not speaking to you because you've said things like it'll get better and it hasn't, and you just need to move on, and let me assure you now, you cannot do this on willpower alone.
No, you need help, don't you, Michelle?
Yeah, I did that for years, and where did I end up? You know, because we're fighting our own selves.
Yes, we are fighting.
And we use that willpower scenario as a way of blaming ourselves for being a failure. And, you know, and that's another cycle. So really think about it when you're sending a child off for some sort of therapy or something like that. I want to know the outcome. I want to know the history around this plan. I want to know, okay, so you've worked with how many children and how many of them? How long did it take before they didn't need you anymore?
Yeah.
Before they were part of your projected income on your income and balance sheet, right? We need to be holding our counsellors and everyone accountable.
Absolutely.
There's a point where we can get off. I got off.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
there's got to be a point where you can get off and you're
Yeah.
free, because now you've
And that
got
should be the purpose. That should be the purpose from the very beginning, is that you will no longer need therapy to cope. You may need top-ups from time to time, but you won't need that intensive level of counselling and therapy that you need right at the beginning.
For years or whatever. I will say here, though, I do know someone who is in the mental health profession herself, and so is her family. Very intelligent people. And she was assaulted by Dad. And she said to me, I could not live without my antidepressants. They get me through the day, right? So that might be the case. If someone does need their pill, but they may need something else as well. And so you've really got to look at it, and you've really got to be able to say, okay, because there can be a lot of other things going on.
Yeah.
And so as a child, I began to compartmentalize bits of me. I was broken up into bits. My personality was fractured, right? And in the book, I talk about this test that I did where they thought maybe I had personality disorder for this job I was applying for. And I had to do this psych evaluation. So I've never lost time. However, I was different people depending on where I was, like a chameleon.
Right.
And I began that as a child, right?
Okay.
And so I had this fractured personality. So there's a lot of things that can happen if we don't step up and actually look at being helpful in the right way. And if that child says, this is not helping, find something else. Don't just accept or go back to the same old, you know, because you're setting yourself up for a lot of heartache, and them too.
Yeah.
Right. So coming back to this whole thing, you know, I talk a lot in my book about identifying predators, seeing them, knowing what they look like, right? Trust your children. If they don't feel comfortable around someone, then
don't let them near them.
Don't go anywhere near them. Look at yourself and understand something. They will buy into your secondary and third gains. Secondary and third gains are things that we get that we find really difficult to let go of. So we might find ourselves in a situation that's not the best, but we may do because there's other things going on that we feel we must have to survive. So it's a real base level, you know, thing often, especially for single mums, is an income provider, right? Or emotional support person. And these are things that we may, unawares to ourselves consciously, hold on to, and we may not be picking up on things that we should be seeing, different things that we should be thinking, hang on a minute.
That's
For
a bit.
example, you know, if you're a single mum and you've got a partner and, you know, he's trying to bond with your child and have one-on-one time, no. You know, no.
Yeah.
Can't tell you how many people I've spoken to, and a lady, it's the references in my book, Michelle Stevens. She was in this very situation. He took her for bonding time. He caged her over a weekend. He beat her. He did a number of things. He literally left her in a state of fear and confusion. He broke her down and built her back up that she would never speak up, and she never did.
Yeah.
And once she was past the golden age, he pimped her out to other pedophiles. And once she got past the age where pedophiles were interested, he pimped her out to men wanting to pay for sex. Oh, because you know, they want it. I don't think she ever made a decision about that herself. So, you know, we really.
Michelle, before we run out of time, the one thing that I wanted to discuss is this wording around grooming and what that looks like, because for these crimes to happen, the perpetrator often has to go through a process of grooming. So I'm wondering if you could just quickly tell the parents listening, when we talk about grooming, what do we mean?
Yeah, so I gave examples where this extended relative, people loved him. The children he assaulted loved him because he was always a very generous person, and he was very supportive, and he was always interactive, and he was always out there with the kids. He was always interested in listening to what they told him. He always remembered, and he would always say, oh, you know, how did you go with that or the other thing? You know, he was always cheerful. This is the things that people remember, right? They're going to groom you, parents. You're going to be groomed.
They are.
Okay, so the wool is going to be, you're going to be groomed first. And that example that I just gave out with that other author, because first of all, they're going to give you something you want and need that they've figured out, and that you are then going to want to hold on to, so that then your guard is down, and then they begin the relationship and the grooming with your children.
The child.
Right? The child. So the handyman in my book, he bought my daughter that jewelry. Well, he bought her expensive jewelry. She didn't really care. There's a lot of girls who are 14 years of age that would think that was very special. Right? And you know, so it meant nothing to her, but it might have meant something to a different girl. And then that girl, that gift, and being told she's special. And in a world where our grades are looked at, we're bullied, you know, everything's rush, and there's no one to listen. Someone who takes the time to think that we're special is somebody that we appreciate, and that is a way in for them. So they're going to look for parents who are very busy, you know, or own. They're going to look for these sort of vulnerabilities in us, the parents, and how they can step in and win us over, win us on our vulnerabilities. So if anyone's being particularly supportive or nice or whatever, the minute we're feeling that we really value that, look at it and think again, what is it about that situation that I value or that's important to me, and is that safe for my child? It's really hard because it's if you've not ever thought about it like that, you know, it can be quite confronting. But we are the gateway to our children. And then, of course, the teachers, the policemen, the ambulance drivers, they are the school chaplain, they are school counsellor. Go to the counsellor and talk to the counsellor. No, we have to go too. We need to be going into school and being seen. We need to be there all the time so that we're saying, hang on, our child is someone special.
Important.
Yeah, and be getting to know our I knew all of my children's teachers, whether they were women or men. And I had dialogue with them regularly because it was important that they knew that I was watching, not necessarily that they were going to assault my children, but that
do anything
for my children. Yeah. No, it's important that
Michelle,
you look at.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you. We are out of time again this week. Thank you for your expertise and explanation. For anyone who wants to ask Michelle any questions about any of this important topic about how to talk to your kids, grooming, how to protect your kids, please connect with Michelle. For those listening online, we've got the links to Michelle's sites. We've also got links to help for anyone who needs help around this subject. And in particular, can I just point out that Michelle does really specialised help in this area through her Angel Insight coaching. And just remember that you can do lots of things to protect your children. You can teach them lots of things so a way that you can ensure that they have a safe and healthy life, and don't succumb to some of the statistical things that happen to children that have been abused. We will be back next week with Michelle for another episode of Making Sense of Sexual Assault. Thank you very much for listening. Michelle, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week with Insight. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.